Hello, Player One. Welcome to the Gaming History Club. My name is Gabby.
Hello, and I'm JP. Remember when you bought a game, you finished the main story, the side quests, you found all the cool armor and items and weapons in the game? Perhaps you even 100%ed the entire game. And you never spent an extra cent since buying that game. This episode will be nothing like that, because today's topic is all about microtransactions.
So, I think it's worth to say that both of us think that microtransactions are bad for video games and its players.
Definitely, we should just put our bias right in front of our community of player one. Just say, yeah, we do not like microtransactions,
Yeah,
do we?
no, we
Not at
don't.
all. No.
Let's get that over and done with.
Yeah, let's just put that out there.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
No, apparently not. Okay, so basically, microtransactions, we see it as they only benefit businesses. At worst, microtransactions ruin many people's real lives, which we will get into. And at best, it allows certain games to be played for quote unquote free if you're willing to tolerate frequent interruptions, temptation to spend cash, or having your personal data mined and sold, probably.
Yeah.
Though innocent as it may seem, microtransactions have some serious issues, and we will visit this controversial topic with calm, collected coolness.
That's right. We are still the Gaming History Club, so we have to be objective about this. But if you, player one, if you have any strong feelings, please share them with us and vent. That's fine.
Okay, I feel like we already put our strong feelings out there, so
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I guess player one will not buy into this calm, collected coolness
Probably
that we
not.
will say.
No.
But yeah, it isn't actually hard to define microtransactions, but here is one from Video Game Microtransactions Ethics from Valdosta State University. Microtransactions are a business model in which users can purchase virtual goods with micropayments. Anything purchased within a video game is usually considered a microtransaction. And you know what, Player One? They use MTX as an abbreviation for microtransaction, which is such a business thing, right?
It's such a sign for things to come, isn't it? If you got an
Yeah,
abbreviation, MTX.
yeah,
What are the
MTX.
what are the key metrics that we use in order to evaluate the situation on a business level?
Yeah, MTX equals
MTX.
dollar.
Yeah, makes it sound all stock trade, doesn't it?
Kind of, yeah, that's true. So, looking further into this, video game microtransactions ethics breaks down microtransactions into types, which provide a great overview but lacks a little detail. So, we will add upon it afterwards. JP, you wanna start on the types?
Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about downloadable content or DLC. So, DLCs tend to make a substantial amount of extra content available to the player, and that can include entire storyline, expansions, levels, and items. They can be humongous. But DLCs are somewhat of an oddball here because they can offer valuable and fairly priced additions to a game,
Mm-hmm.
what is often referred to as the base game. So while DLCs have the potential to be absolutely huge and make massive changes to the game, they can also be very, very small
Mm-hmm.
and minor. They can be tiny and insignificant and cost way too much. For example, just straight from the top of my head, like a new color for a gun, right? And sell that at like, God knows, $2, right? There you go, yeah. So it can be that small too. For mainly this reason, we have decided that we will only lightly touch on DLC today because it's not at the very core, I think, of what microtransactions are and what most people think about when they hear microtransactions. It also has a much deeper history, DLC, because we're looking at expansion packs and add-ons that came before DLCs, which is its own kettle of fish. Really, it's a really interesting thing to look at. So we'll leave that a little bit for future episode.
Yeah, and actually, that's a really good point about DLC. Some of them provide such a good value, as you mentioned. Like if you see Phantom Liberty, Cyberpunk 2077, or the newest DLC for Elden Ring, which is going to be really big. And that's what I mean. It has the potential to be real value for money, like a completely different game.
Yeah, that's right.
So there are two further types described in the video game microtransactions ethic as types of microtransaction. So the first one is virtual currency, basically in-game money, items or resources like energy, which has a grand total value of absolutely nothing in the real world. However, they do cost very real world money, which you have to earn for real. I mean, not that real world money is anymore real, but this is probably a matter for different type of podcasts to talk about, and not in a gaming podcast, is it?
No, you went deep, Gabby. You went real deep here.
But yeah, sometimes this virtual currency can also be gained by simply playing the game as opposed to paying for it. But this comes with caveats, which we'll get into shortly. So, the last type that we want to talk about here is loot boxes. This one is the most controversial and the ugliest form microtransactions can take. As opposed to virtual currency, loot boxes will give the player a random in game item purchased directly with real money or indirectly with virtual currency that can sometimes, like earlier mentioned, be earned from playing the game. But this will extremely entice, incentivizes, and systematically favors players who are using cash. The reason for this type of microtransactions being named as the most controversial is because it is more often than not deemed to be a form of gambling.
So while the paper does well by giving us a general lay of the land by putting these into three categories, DLCs, virtual currency, and loot boxes, let's take a look at some actual examples to see how the mechanisms actually work in real life. And when researching for examples, by the way, can I just say, we found that the vast majority of disillusioned player ones probably all like to sum up microtransactions into a single type and category: the predatory exploitation of consumers.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was actually easier to find a fairly comprehensive list of examples from businesses that give guidance on implementing the microtransactions business model. And they advertise that microtransactions, quote unquote, maximize revenue generation, enables sustained game development and upgrades, expand game reach, and my favorite one, improves player experience at a low cost.
It's like improves player experience, dot, dot, dot,
At a
at a
low.
low cost.
Yeah, I disagree here, but you know. Most of these examples will be quite familiar to player ones all around the world, since in all likelihood we've all played a mobile game that has at least some of these, if not all of these. So, first of all, nice and easy, we got small purchases. So, these are just small in game advantages at a relatively small fee. So, a runner type mobile game allowing you to continue your run after losing your lives. That would be like a common basic example. We got bonus purchases, so sometimes also called bundles. Why buy one virtual coin for $1 when you could buy 100 virtual coins for $20? How about a 200 virtual coins and a unique weapon for just $39.99? Bonus purchases aim to upsell the player into making a higher purchase. Next, we got energy and experience boosters. A player character level increases with experience points usually, stating the obvious much there. Buy an XP booster to level up twice as quick. Sometimes games also limit the amount of progress a player can make based on what is often called energy in games, but it can be called all kinds of things. And this energy replenishes slowly over time, and then the energy boosters can be bought so that you can actually stop waiting around. You can just continue playing the game.
More examples on this, like skins and customizations. These microtransactions are somewhat more approved, I guess, as they make a player character look different, but doesn't give them an unfair advantage. To win, they must prove skill and fair in game dedication and investment to progress the story or defeat other players. It is common to see like holiday themed bundles. So if you want this Christmas skin or if you want this horse armor, can I actually say?
Yeah, you can, of course, yeah. Let the cat out the bag or the horse out of the armor.
Foreshadowing much there. The next example is limited use items. These are consumable items that when you buy the items, it will give you an advantage of some sort, but only temporarily and serve to not allow a paying player to have a permanent advantage versus other players, whilst still making a profit, of course.
Of course.
The next one is pay to unlock. This allows player to skip levels, unlock exclusive levels, for example, unlocking characters or items, and these ones can get expensive. Something worth noting as well is that microtransactions can clearly make players that pay money stronger and have an advantage of players that do not. And when you listen to the examples, let's keep in mind that the range of money spent can be between $1 to hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous amounts of money, actually.
Yeah, many microtransactions are in the lower range, with the larger ones being aimed at so called whales, which the video games publishers attract with uniquely expensive items. These microtransactions are made knowing that they will attract fewer people.
It goes against all kind of gaming culture that anyone will have intuitively. Where, if you want to be good at a game, you better dedicate to learning it, playing
Mhm.
it better, practicing, etc., etc. And this is all just about, give us some money and we'll make the entire thing easier for you. And you'll even be better against all the peasants that didn't give us a single cent for this game.
Exactly. Sounds like real world much, isn't it?
Yeah, so I guess that's what they call the pay to win type of games.
Ah,
Derogatory term, not official. Pay to win. You do not want to be pay to win.
I want to get paid to win though.
Yeah, that would be cool. Again, pay to win. So let's take a look at the history and some key events in the timeline of microtransactions. Then let's get away from the technical stuff a little bit and talk history. So, in some capacity, microtransactions have always existed in principle. Looking back at the early video game arcades, you paid per play, but we know that this doesn't really seem to be a microtransaction, of course. But let me take it a step further, because in the 90s, we had Double Dragon 3, for example, and a player can enter a shop and insert additional quarters to buy upgrades. And this was more than just extra lives too. This included special moves and characters. For me personally, this might be like a really prime example of microtransactions before microtransactions actually. Although most people would probably not call it that, but for me, it's in principle, it ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, I think it's quite crazy to think about how an arcade games can incorporate microtransactions with this way. So, yeah, it's quite shocking when looking into this. I'm like, oh, even in arcade, you already could do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But let's rewind back first and take a look outside the arcades. While again, we don't want to focus too much on DLCs, we will have to talk about them a little bit. We need to mention that DLC's precursor, so the expansion pack or sometimes called add ons, these worked very similar, with the main difference being that you had to buy a physical copy of the expansion pack. It wasn't downloadable.
Mm-hmm.
So, expansion packs were most common for computer games and have been around since at least 1979, with the release of one of the earliest RPGs that included graphics, which was called Temples of Afsai, made by Epix. And expansion packs that added content for an already purchased game were often very popular before DLCs came around. So, notable examples here are Half Life, The Sims, Microsoft Flight Simulator. But to be fair, consoles and arcades, they also had expansion packs too. But for the sake of just putting that out there, we did have DLCs before DLCs, and often they were also very popular and held in high regards. But microtransactions truly started in the late 90s and early 2000s, being popularized by the so called free to play model.
Yes, so the free to play model describes a game that you can play without having to buy anything or to pay any subscription fee, basically. A purely free to play game would be monetized by ads that cannot be disabled by paying any money. And then, when a game allowing you to disable those ads by paying money, that will already go into the realm of freemium or free premium. So, freemium describes any game that offers item or resources as purchase within a free to play game. So basically, not all free to play games are freemium, but all freemium are free to play games in some sense. Pay to win games fall into the freemium category. So pay to win is when you will have massive advantage when you're paying certain items or paying to get additional stuff. Anyway, Techopedia describes the differences really well in an article that we will link in the description. But don't worry, player one, because there are actual free games too, like fully free, no ads, no purchases, nothing. We know there's not many of them, but they are out there.
Yeah, 100%. Fully free, truly free, completely free. Food for another episode, definitely, though.
Hmm.
So, the first game using microtransactions as we think of them today is a text based MUD, multi user dungeon, game developed by Iron Realms Entertainment and its founder, Matt Mahali, called Achaea Dreams of Divine Lands, released in 1997 and is still playable today. So when the game launched, access to the internet was still time limited. AOL charged $10 for 5 hours. And back then, AOL believed that 90% of its customers will not use more than 5 hours of internet per month, and additional hours could be purchased at a rate of $3.50. Wow, going on the internet was expensive back in the day, huh?
I know. Not only expensive, it seems like their perception of people using internet was still very narrow as well.
Yeah, very, very narrow indeed. I don't think they truly anticipated where the internet was going to go.
I don't think so either.
Mind you, mid to late 90s, probably still a baby, and many's eyes don't even know what to do with the internet. Anywho, in 1997, however, AOL started to offer flat rate plans for $19.95 per month, and this caused an issue for Matt, the developer of the game. The game was becoming unprofitable because the cost of operations was now increasing a lot because more players could spend a lot more time now playing the game than previously.
Mhm.
So, this gave rise to the game's controversial revenue structure. Players spend money for credits that are then used in game to acquire skills and better equipment. And some can cost as much as 2,500 credits, which would be the equivalent of $725 per item.
That's a lot of money.
There's a lot of money. I mean, that is not the most average purchase you can make in the game, I'm sure of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
this is just to kind of highlight what people think is the value of an item here in this game. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess when you call it microtransactions, you realize how not micro they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's just it's a little bit of propaganda having called it a microtransaction. I think. Let's be honest here. Yeah, this isn't language that player once came up with, is it? Not
No,
really.
I don't think so. It sounds very misleading. But yeah, free to play games and microtransactions quickly gained popularity in South Korea with the success of games made by the South Korean publisher Nexon. Starting in 1999 with the release of a game called Quiz Quiz. It's an MMO quiz game that is also one of the earliest free to play games that use microtransactions as revenue model. It seems like Quiz Quiz wasn't extremely popular as the game was shut down after just 5 years later in 2004. The creator of Quiz Quiz, Lee Seung Chan, however, would go on to create Maple Story, released in 2003, a hugely popular and successful game. As of 2020, the game has grossed over $3 billion and had a total of 180 million registered users. It's a big game.
It was a big deal. Oh yeah. And in 2001, we also saw the release of RuneScape, created by Andrew Gower with the help of his brother Paul Gower, and the game running from their parents' house in Nottingham, by the way. By February 2002, a monthly membership was introduced that allowed players additional features in game. Though I'm not sure if we should count a subscription in a free to play game as a type of microtransaction. It falls more into the free to play category, I guess, than freemium, doesn't it? But RuneScape had a really big influence in the free to play model. Absolutely huge. So the Guinness Book of World Records has actually awarded RuneScape of a total of 15 records so far. But Frida, I want to point out the most users of an MMO video game being 254 994,744 players, so just over a quarter of a billion. The most prolifically updated MMORPG video game, which had more than 1,014 updates. And the most original pieces of music in a video game, including its expansions, being over 1,198 songs. Controversially, in 2012, RuneScape introduced a loot box mechanic that they named Squeal of Fortune, and a couple months later introduced their virtual currency, Rune Coins, into the game, despite the CEO, Mark Gerhardt, calling microtransactions a stealth tax, and RuneScape actively having prohibited and banned players for selling virtual items in the game previously to this. So they were making sure that players weren't secretly, trading money for accounts. Like they were quite big on that, and now suddenly they completely flip in 2012.
That's because they didn't get the money from the transaction of players.
Yeah.
But this way, then they can make sure that it goes through them.
Yeah, there's some big push always to go for microtransactions, and the guys who made a lot of money out of it, they really push for other games to follow suit because it'll make their own games seem
Yeah.
almost so much more successful.
That's
Yeah,
true.
we'll see a little bit later on as well.
Yeah, and by the 2000s, microtransactions were seen in popular online games, especially games of the social variety. Examples of this are Habbo Hotel from 2001 by the Finnish company Sulake, a 2D isometric game with public and private rooms. Virtual currency could be bought and used in order to decorate your room or customizing other aspects of the game. Another one that's worth to mention is Second Life, made by Linden Lab. This one was released in 2003. It would officially prefer to only be loosely associated with video games. Instead, it wants to appear as a social media platform. There is no narrative or goal of any kind in game. Although they don't want to be called officially as a game, but within this quote unquote game, customizations of all kinds are open to the player to create and even sell to other players using virtual currency called Linden Dollars. Not just items though, virtual property can be purchased, sold, and rented to other players. Real embassies and religious institutions are represented within the parallel digital universe of Second Life. It's literally like giving you a second life.
It is pretty frightening, but yeah, it's like actual religious institutions, and I mean represented in an official capacity by their official real life counterparts. It's yeah, they really jumped on the bandwagon here. A lot of people for
Yeah.
Second Life.
And at the height of its success, there were more than 1.2 million daily transactions made. Second Life had an estimated GDP of $500 million. By the way, some small countries' GDP is actually less than that.
Yeah, not many. I did double check. It's about 10. So it's not like oh my god, but like still, yeah.
Which is crazy how much money Second Life was making. A player going by the avatar name of Ashi Chung actually became a millionaire by means of virtual real estate, converting an initial investment of $10 into over $1 million in 2.5 years. JP, tell me again, why are we not doing this?
Because I don't know, but don't you feel like it's more sly to be doing this in like an online world where you don't have to show people your real body language and you're just like, hey, this is the offer of a lifetime. Just give me your password and your username.
Do you want to buy this property where you cannot live in?
Why would you have a second life and then you deal with real estate issues? Honestly, is that the most fun part of a real life? That this is what you must also do in your second life? But let's get right down and dirty now with microtransactions, okay? It was in 2002 that Xbox Live went live. And when researching online for the history of microtransactions, most people point to a DLC released for the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion in 2006 as being the first microtransaction that was sold by a major publisher. The DLC was a set of horse armor, and it sold for just $2.50. It's just a horse armor skin. Nothing, it's just horse armor.
Yeah.
$2.50. And it appears that this was actually somewhat of an experimental move from Microsoft in conjunction with Bethesda to test players' appetite for paying for extra content in a normal game. This isn't some MMO like Maple Story or RuneScape. This is a normal game, AAA, major publisher. Will the player pay an extra $2.50 for this horse armor? It was largely an experimental move.
Yeah, because this is only for that one player. It's not even for online, for other people to see what your horse armor is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see why most people would point to microtransactions having really primarily formed in this kind of context. And it really does set a model for future DLCs to come. And it's again why we try to stay a little bit clear from DLC because, yes, you can have, Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. And yeah, that might very well be worth its money. But then you have a DLC and it's just horse armor skin. So it's hard to really, bring DLC fully into the picture as part of this episode. And you know what, though? Despite the negativity from players, and this did have an honestly major backlash from the gaming community, it appears that this must have been, a successful experiment because it has set a template for how DLCs are done in this context afterwards, after Horse Armor Skin.
So the horse armor skin fiasco was in 2006, and just 1 year later, in 2007, the first generation of iPhones were released. That's ushering in the era of smartphones and mobile games, and of course, we couldn't talk about microtransactions without talking about phones
Yeah,
or
just
mobile games.
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, two big ones to name here are Zynga's Farmville and Supercell's Clash of Clans, another game from Finland, actually. Though in the case of Farmville, they were also very popular, played on Facebook on a computer. So both of these games, Farmville and Clash of Clans, popularized the use of microtransactions in order to skip waiting in game before another action can be carried out. That's the concept of quote unquote energy in game. So, Clash of Clans and Candy Crush Saga are examples of games using microtransactions that have received a lot of negative feedback from the gaming community for being paid to win, rewarding gamers that spend more real life money. Back in 2014, Tommy Palm, game designer and now CEO of Resolution Games, worked on various mobile games including Candy Crush Saga. He's even being called King of Mobile by Pocket Gamer, and he has said this quote: "The microtransaction is so strong that it's definitely a much better model than the traditional prepackaged model. I think all companies have to transition over to that." Hmm.
Hmm. Let's talk about loot boxes next. So, I think we all know what loot is, but you defeat an enemy character, and whatever items he has for you to collect afterwards, that is your loot. Again, super smart. I know video games. Especially in MMORPGs, massive multiplayer online RPGs, that is, a randomized loot drop system was necessary to award the players for defeating enemies. And loot boxes took this approach but monetized it. So rather than defeating any enemies, you simply pay a fee to get a random box of loot. Random being the key word here. But they're not usually called loot boxes, and for a good reason, because they have garnered a lot of negative feedback. So they'll try to call them anything other than loot boxes.
Mm.
Yeah, and in the game we talked about previously, Maple Story, an item called the Gachapon ticket was introduced, and at a price of 100 yen in 2004, with this ticket, you guessed it, you could get a randomized assortment of items in game. And the gachapon in real life are actually those vending machines with little balls inside with random collectibles that,
Ah,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, and they're actually a Bandai trademark. Did you know that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just thought it was like kids stuff, and there wasn't. Apparently, it's a Bandai trademark.
that's interesting to know. So, going to the Western world, what introduced loot boxes to the masses would took a while longer. Usually, EA's FIFA Online is cited as introducing loot box mechanics to the masses. So, in March 2009, EA introduced exploitative loot box mechanics into its previously much beloved Ultimate Team Game mode. For real life cash, you would have the honor of unlocking players, stadiums, and other basic stuff. And you know what, Player One? We don't even feel bad calling it exploitative. Let's quote the then CEO of EA, John Riccitiello, who announced in a stockholder meeting: when you are 6 hours into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo in your clip and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're really not that price sensitive at that point in time.
I tell you what, you would be incredibly sensitive in overcapacities at that point in time, though. If you
Yeah,
run out of ammo and you're being asked for like $1 to reload, believe me, I can get pretty sensitive about this
I
kind of
think
stuff.
so too. I will probably incline to just shut down the game.
Yeah, rage quit.
Rage quit, indeed. Yeah, and with loot boxes in particular, links have been drawn to gambling. And though at first governments were slow to pick up on legislations and regulation of the market, this is slowly changing. Some might consider that loot boxes are not truly gambling because anything quote unquote won in a loot box cannot be converted back into real money. However, studies such as the National Institutes of Health or NIH, as part of the US Department of Health and Human Services, highlight that first, microtransaction engagement is associated with gaming and gambling disorder. Secondly, loot boxes appear to pose greater risk for addiction than other microtransactions. Third point, greater in game expenditure increased with risk of gambling disorder. And fourth, prevalence rates of gaming and gambling disorder varied significantly. So, whether gambling or not, the practice of loot boxes is greedy and predatory, and it has destroyed many people's real lives. There's multiple stories of consumers or sometimes unknowingly their young children addicted to loot boxes, spending thousands and tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, as part of my research, I did want to bring up a few examples, but I very quickly realized that there's just too many of them and they're all as bad as each other. Whether it's like, someone who spent more than $10,000 over the course of 3 years,
Mm.
or someone basically within a few weeks spent all of his university grant money on it. Like there's so many stories, and then some involving children. There's just way too many. There's literally no point. If you're interested, go ahead and Google. You'll be filled and filled and filled with unfortunate stories of this. The microtransactions market is predicted to be worth $80 billion by the end of 2024. The biggest revenue generating mobile games are Honor of Kings, also known as the Arena of Valor internationally, at $18.6 billion to date. Candy Crush Saga has made $12 billion, PUBG $11 billion, and Fortnite, a cross platform online game, has produced more than $26 billion. Star Citizen, a game that has been in development since its Kickstarter campaign first went live back in 2012, already allows you to buy assets for the game, including the Legatus Pack, a pack that comes with over 100 chips and several extras for $27,000. It's absolutely humongous. This isn't a microtransaction anymore, is it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, if it costs deposit of your mortgage, I don't think you can call it microtransactions anymore.
No, definitely not. I guess the value really depends on who's going to pay for it. Yeah, I mean, if you say like, I'm going to give you this Legatus pack for $27,000, if someone buys it, then it has that value of $27,000, I guess. But wow.
Yeah, it's still a lot of money.
Anyway, thank you for joining us, Player One. We hope you enjoyed this episode, brought to you completely for free by your Gaming History Club.
So, what are your experiences and thoughts on microtransactions, Player One? Any purchases that left you with regrets? Well, let us know by dropping us a message on our website, gaminghistory.club. New episodes of Gaming History Club are released every other Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Gaming History Club.
Come back in a couple of weeks, Player One, when we have our second round of chit chat episodes when Gabby and I discuss some of gaming's most cryptic puzzles. See ya.